Today's latest Pentagon drop of the UFO files. It is the third drop by the government so far, arguably the most compelling one yet. I'm going to show you these videos that have people very excited, confused, break it all down, got an all-star UFO panel. Then there's the Palisades fire trial. Have you been following this? The devastating wildfire. The question is, was it a tragic accident or was it a crime? There is a lawyer who is representing thousands of victims going to join us. My understanding, he believes this guy may get off. We'll talk about it. We also have the latest on the Iran peace deal. A lot of back and forth there. Based on what we're hearing now, are we really at the end of the war? Is a potential deal real here? What would it look like? I want to get into that. And there are new reports that a massive El Nino may be about to cause a great white shark, a surge of sharks on the U.S. beaches. So our shark expert, we've had her on before, we're going to bring her back on, what you need to know. But we got to start where I began, UFO drop. Okay, so the government has just released its third batch of files. And honestly, this may be the most intriguing one yet. I don't say that lightly. Among the most talked about cases, look at this, a series of newly released videos from this secret location in the Northeast where federal investigators say these glowing orbs have been appearing since 2021. And we're not talking about a single light that's moving around the sky. No, there is one video that shows a bright orb that appears to split, turning into multiple orbs over the course of just a few minutes. There's another that shows two reddish objects hovering, motionless, side by side before disappearing. The FBI actually visited the site, saw the phenomenon themselves. According to the files, investigators even documented reports of GPS disruptions, electronic malfunctions, spikes in gamma radiation during some of these events. And then there's this other case, a Western U.S. incident where government investigators described what they called orbs launching other orbs. According to the files, a glowing object appeared to release smaller objects mid-flight, moving in different directions against the expected flight patterns, leaving investigators absolutely baffled. And there's this too, from the 1970s, a surprising comment that's buried in this newly released NASA audio. It's during a debrief after the mission. There's an official who's heard mentioning an alien starbase, seemingly on the dark side of the moon. Kind of hard to tell if he was making an offhand comment, speculated, making a joke, but you be the judge. Take a listen.
It correlates pretty well with the laser data, which shows a great big hole here in the backside of the moon around Fendigraph, and that's where we get our big hole, but I can't see any scientific justification for connecting the two results.
I will add, to remind you, the gamma ray
Yes, that's true.
secondary peak is also at Pentagon. I don't know what it means.
Could be an alien starbase or something, I don't know. Anyway, the next slide shows the front side of the moon.
Yeah, alien starbase, why not? How does this compare to what we saw in the other file dumps, right? The first drop felt kind of like an opening statement, historical files, old reports, military footage, super hot orb chased by U.S. military aircraft. The second one gave us more videos, firsthand testimony, reports from military personnel who said that they were left virtually speechless after strange encounters. But here's the thing, for many UFO believers, this third drop still doesn't include what they actually want. Whistleblower David Grush, lawmakers like Anna Paulina Luna, Tim Burchett, they say the government is still withholding the big stuff. The alleged crash retrieval programs, claims of non-human bodies, special access programs they say exist outside the normal congressional oversight. They're also demanding immunity for more whistleblowers to come forward. The government continues to say it's found no verified evidence of extraterrestrial technology. So is this real transparency? Is it distraction from everything else that's happening in Washington? Is this the greatest movie marketing campaign of all time? I want to bring in our all-star UFO panel to break it down. Avi Loeb, astrophysicist, Harvard professor, one of the world's leading voices on the scientific search for extraterrestrial life. Jordan Flowers, the executive director of the Disclosure Foundation, an organization advocating for greater government transparency on UAPs. And Sarah Gam is a former intelligence analyst with a background in physics, who is part of the Department of Defense's UAP task force. Great to have you all here. Sarah, I just mentioned it. You were an analyst there. How do the files, how do what we saw today compare to what you've seen? I mean, are we getting the whole picture?
No, definitely not yet. The whole picture is far from being released, but I think it's a good progress on chipping away a little bit more.
Okay, but just let me follow up on that. What do you make of this? I mean, the idea that you're seeing the orbs, and Avi, I'm gonna come to you also, but you see the orbs, and then these reports of GPS disruption and the gamma radiation. How should we be thinking about that?
I think it's amazing what has been released, and that is also what we've been hearing for a long time now.
Right.
I know on the task force days there was a lot of reports of power outages at places, at military bases, and elsewhere across the world. So none of this is a surprise to me, and I will remain hopeful that we will get more and more data.
Avi, this is a big day for you. Not only the release, you also saw Disclosure Day. It's almost like your birthday, but you got to tell me, you're looking at these objects, the orbs. I don't know what to make of it. Do you have an answer?
Well, I must say, I just saw indeed the movie that Steven Spielberg made up out of his artistic taste and imagination. But reality is far more imaginative than scriptwriters in Hollywood. And what we read in the release today is quite intriguing. My main concern, frankly, is that perhaps we're dealing with very sophisticated Chinese drones that are being deposited throughout the US, and we just don't recognize that. And I think that should be a very serious concern within the intelligence
But
agencies.
Avi, what
within
makes
the
you say that? What's about the way they're moving and separating? Why do you think it could be a Chinese drone?
Well, we are looking at orbs, and the simplest interpretation is that there might be drones that are, for example, releasing baby drones out of them, smaller ones. I'm not sure how feasible that is. Now, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, led by John Kozlowski, looked into the report from 2023, and in fact, analyzed it in great detail, and he wrote a full memo about it in this release from a week ago, from the 5th of June. And he says that 40% of the phenomena cannot be explained based on what they know, based on technologies the US possesses, and the technologies that foreign adversaries possess. So I must say it's very puzzling. The best way forward would be to get more data and figure it out. I mean, it's like a detective story.
Right, it definitely is. Jordan, this is the part that I took away from the whole day. The FBI reaction, right? It's not just accounts of, hey, we heard these reports, interesting. You got FBI agents saying, are you seeing this? Their own and that goes to the larger part where people who believe that this is a cover-up, people who believe that the government knows exactly what it is. If the FBI seemingly doesn't know what this is, what do you make of that?
That's exactly right. The FBI, and this is important for your audience to understand as well, not only are senior members of Congress taking this issue extremely seriously, the FBI is actively investigating several different aspects of this phenomena, from potential criminal activity involved in treatment of whistleblowers to the incursions against our sensitive military airspace. So the FBI is involved, and I have been told on Capitol Hill that the briefing that the FBI has been providing to members of Congress about this topic has been, quote, the hottest ticket in town, and more members have been receiving that, and I think that's one of the reasons why this topic has escalated rapidly from maybe a top 10 issue to truly a top 3 issue in this administration.
Jordan, just to stay with you for a second, how does this fit into the disclosures we've seen so far? And I think I'm just going to keep using the word disclosure because I like it, and also it's Disclosure Day. But how does this fit into the overall disclosures, the file dumps that we've seen? And I got to tell you, I'm actually impressed by the level of transparency by what we're seeing in these documents and these videos. But where do you see it?
I'm impressed too. It's a step in the right direction. With some of our prior conversations, we have talked about how there wasn't analysis that came along with some of these releases. Dr. Loeb made a great point about there was a memo included in this release from Dr. Kozlowski, the director of Aero, that actually provided analysis. So that feedback is being heard and apparently satisfied. Dr. Loeb issued a write-up, which I thought was great, from his website. And then we have the members of Congress having a press conference today that you showed pictures from. I was at that press conference. I was standing behind David Grush and Representatives Burchett and Luna. And I tell you what, they are absolutely pushing for greater transparency. And as Sarah said, We haven't seen the last of it. There is significantly more data to be released. And a lot of things that could be released are things that the task force worked on.
Sarah, let me go back to you for a second. How well does the government run? How much are they investigating this? I talk about the files being obtained from CIA, FBI, DOD. What do you think is going on behind the scenes in terms of an investigation to find out what this is?
Yeah, I can validate for certainty that there's a lot of research that goes on behind the scenes. So when I was on the task force, we would do anything and everything. We would reach out to the drone operators, like if it was an MQ-9, to get what the emotions were like there whenever they first saw it, how hard it was to reacquire, investigate weather data. I mean, you name it. We would research bird migration patterns over whatever spot it was in the world. So there is a lot of research that does go on behind the scenes, and I know a lot of people don't always agree with how Arrow operates, but I can say that there's some really good and analysts that are working under Arrow right now, and they are doing, I'd say, be above and beyond what the task force did, because that's their full-time job. Like when I was on the task force, I supported it from NGA, so I wasn't on the official senior level panel, but there was it was volunteer basis. So these people are, that this is their full-time job, and so they take it very seriously. And I give them kudos for what they're still doing now for the research that goes on.
Avi, you get the final word. We have about 45 seconds. What do you make of that Starbase audio?
Oh, I think we can pretty much ignore that because it was a side comment that is not indicative of something real. We actually, Artemis 2 flew over the far side of the moon, and there wasn't anything unusual over there. So I think most importantly, if you are down to earth in your thinking and you're trying to be as realistic as possible, and that's what the intelligence agencies are supposed to do, you have to be intrigued by this because you're not doing your job. There are objects over sensitive sites within the US that are potential threats to national security. We have to figure it out. There needs to be more funds allocated to the research. And, at the end of the day, if it's human-made, we have to protect the U.S. against that.
And I hope it's the proper funding. But look, with the more interest in this, that's probably what you may see. Avi Loeb, Jordan Flower, Sarah Gam, thank you so much for coming on. Really, really appreciate it. Now, I want to switch gears. I want to talk about something that I mentioned before. I want to turn to the Palisades fire trial, okay? This is where federal prosecutors claim that an obsession with fire, this resentment against the wealthy, allegedly drove 30-year-old Jonathan Rinderknecht to start one of the most destructive disasters in Los Angeles history. 12 were killed. Over 6,000 structures were destroyed when this fire erupted in one of LA's wealthiest neighborhoods on January 7th of last year. But prosecutors claim the fire actually started 6 days earlier, when Rinderknecht allegedly started what came to be known as the Lockman Fire in the early hours of January 1st. Authorities say that blaze burned underground for days before flaring back up into the Palisades fire. And he has been accused of 3 federal charges, including destruction of property by means of fire, arson affecting property used in interstate commerce, and timber set afire. If convicted, he could face 45 years in prison. Now, so far, prosecutors have presented text messages that allegedly show he was angry at being jilted for a New Year's Eve date, which led to him allegedly starting the blaze using a green lighter that the cops say they later found in his car. Surveillance video allegedly showing him at the scene after the fire began. But the defense, which has long contended that there's no physical evidence linking their client to the crime, they came back. They said that it merely shows, or they may say that he merely saw the fire, called 911 to report it, that the phone records show he called the emergency line at least 16 times. Prosecutors also apparently called ATF Special Agent Michael Montevidoni to the stand, who testified that the defendant's online activity grew increasingly angry in the months leading up to the fire, allegedly asking ChatGPT to create images depicting destruction and class inequality. But defense attorney Steve Haney again countered, getting the agent to admit that in spite of the angry messages about class, his client never asked ChatGPT for advice on how to start a fire. Trial's expected to go on for at least another week, but this isn't, by the way, the only legal action on the fire working its way through the courts. Palisades fire victims have filed a massive lawsuit against the state of California, the city of LA, a slew of other entities for allowing the 8-acre Lockman fire to explode into one of the worst disasters in the state's history. And LA Mayor Karen Bass, whose handling of the fire has been blasted by homeowners, she saw this lawsuit take a personal turn today. Why? Because her own brother has joined the lawsuit, alleging experienced injuries, emotional distress when the fire burned down their home. So you got two big cases to talk about, and thankfully, our next guest knows them both inside and out, okay? Roger Bailey is the lead trial attorney and partner at Foley, Bezic, Bailey, and Curtis LLP, represents the more than 3,000 victims of the Palisades fire in that lawsuit. Thank you so much for taking the time. So, correct me if I'm wrong, you don't think this is a slam dunk case against Reinerknecht?
Well, I'll tell you, I attended the criminal trial this week, and having seen what I saw, I think the government has a real uphill battle. You'll remember that the federal government charged the defendant with committing arson, and that arson resulted in the entire Palisades community burning down. But what people didn't understand is that there were actually two separate fires, one on January 1 that burned only 8 acres of brush. And then 6 days later, you had embers rekindling and starting a second fire called the Palisades fire. And that's what burned down the Palisades and portions of Malibu. And the government's trying to connect those two separate fires as one fire. And I'll tell you, yesterday it came out in cross-exam that the ATF interviewed more than 12 people who saw smoke coming up from the hills in those 6 days, took video of smoke coming up from the hills in the 6 days. That's the time when the state of California, who owns that land, should have been up there making sure there weren't embers smoldering. They didn't do it, and because they didn't do it, we had the Palisades fire. So I don't think they're going to get a conviction here.
Just to be clear, if they prove that he started the one fire, that even if they can prove that, you're saying it won't necessarily mean that he should be convicted. I mean, and correct me if I'm understanding, because the way that I'm seeing it, they say they have cell phones, the cell phone technology that puts him in the area where the fire is. They have the car that can place him in the area of the fire. They have the ChatGPT alleged searches, surveillance. If they say, hey, this guy started a fire, you don't need, that's still not the end of the case.
Well, not at all. Remember, it's the federal government that brought these charges. And the Lockman fire, that 8-acre small brush fire that burned no homes and killed no people, isn't on federal land. And frankly, the federal court wouldn't have jurisdiction over this entire case if it's just the Lockman fire. So the government needs to get a conviction that extends into that second fire called the Palisades fire. And the evidence that they have, even on the Lockman fire, remember, there were reports, over 30 reports of fireworks on New Year's Eve. The LAFD's initial conclusion was that the Lockman fire was started by fireworks. It wasn't for 10 months that the ATF came out and said, oh, we actually think it's an arsonist. So I think the government has some real big problems here.
Yeah, and it's interesting because they also really highlight, he had this anger towards the wealthy, he spoke highly of Luigi Mangione, but that might not be it. So I want to ask you about the lawsuit that you've been working on. How would this verdict affect the lawsuit, if at all?
Well, the overlap between the two cases is, our case against the state of California and the city of Los Angeles is focused on those 6 days between the Lockman fire on January 1 and the Palisades fire on January 7th. Those 6 days is the focus of our case. And interestingly, those 6 days are what the government in the arson trial wants the jury to sort of ignore. They're just treating this as one big fire that was burning undetected underground. But our evidence, when it came out, showed that over those 6 days, we had state park employees who saw smoke coming out of the ground. We had hikers seeing smoke coming out of the ground, 911 calls reporting smoke. So the overlap between these two cases is those 6 days. We say it's the government's fault for not making sure those embers were extinguished. The federal government in the arson trial says it's all one big fire. This guy started the one on January 1. It's his fault.
It's interesting. We have about 30 seconds left. How important is this lawsuit? Like when you think about how important is their success for your clients?
Well, 6,000 homes were destroyed, more than 12 people died. We just can't have this happen again. If anything comes of this lawsuit, we want it to be that the government does better. There's no excuse for the failures that we saw here. Government needs to do better. People deserve better.
Roger Bailey, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Jesse.
We got a special note tonight across the country. Nexstar Media Group, News Nation employees, they mark the company's 30th anniversary with the day of service, helping their communities. Some projects focused on veterans, painting murals to honor those who have served. Others bought meals and supplies to seniors. Our company's founder, Perry Sook, also took part.
The best thing we can do to celebrate the growth of Nexstar is to give back to those local communities. So that's how Founders Day started 10 years ago. And as we celebrate our 30th anniversary as a company next week, this is how we celebrate, by giving back.
It's great. It's great. Happy Founders Day, everybody. Coming up, so with President Donald Trump's 80th birthday happening this weekend, there's never been any doubt that it would be a busy one for the president. The UFC octagon ready to go at the White House, but could we also see a peace deal with Iran this weekend as well? A lot to talk about next. With the president's 80th birthday coming up on Sunday, this weekend was always going to be a big one. Now, the stage is already set for this massive UFC fight on White House grounds that's expected to draw thousands. It's being billed as part of the America's 250th celebration, even though America's actual birthday is still weeks away. And of course, today, the World Cup is back in the United States for the first time in 32 years, something Trump was central to making happen in his first term. So he's got to be feeling good about that, too. But beyond sports, it's the news coming out of the Middle East, coming out of Pakistan, who's been a key mediator in a U.S.-Iran peace deal. That could make this weekend even more important because Pakistan has said that, quote, final agreed-upon text of a deal has been reached. But what's in that deal? Can it stand considering only hours after those remarks, U.S. forces apparently shot down multiple Iranian drones that were heading toward the Strait of Hormuz? Could it really come together this weekend, right before President Trump heads to the French Alps to attend the 2026 G7 summit? Who better to ask? The News Nation White House correspondent Libby Dean, live from Washington, D.C. Libby, always good to see you. I got to start with Iran here. What can you tell us about this deal? Because the president said today that there were some alleged leaked details that have nothing to do with the actual terms. He said in a Truth Social post that the Iranian regime are dishonorable. What do we know about what's going on there?
Yeah, and that's why we're listening to these senior administration officials within the Trump administration who did lay out what the terms are, at least from the U.S. perspective at this point. That's what we're taking as far as what is actually in this deal. And what it is actually opening the Strait of Hormuz, ending that blockade, also dismantling Iran's nuclear program, destroying and also removing Iran's enriched uranium stockpile. That is just a few of the points within this deal and the more broader points. And also one point of it, Jesse, is it really kickstarts this 60-day period for more talks, more technical talks about how you go and get that enriched uranium. The senior administration official was laying out, obviously, what we knew, that this is not some simple task that the U.S. can undertake, especially if they're going to destroy it and remove it. So I think that there's a long path ahead, but this was the optimism that we have seen out of the White House, at least heading into the weekend, Jesse. Yeah, and there's also a question if there's going to be a meeting of the minds and frozen funds and war reparations in Israel and Lebanon. This military action that I talked about near the Strait of Hormuz, what exactly happened? How could that impact this whole deal? Yeah, so the U.S. shot down Iranian drones attempting to hit ships in the Strait of Hormuz, and that is according to United States Central Command. There's been a lot of fire that we've been talking about during the ceasefire. Actually, every night this week, Jesse, we've been talking about this. It all started back on Monday with the Iranians, according to the president, hitting that U.S. helicopter, and then the exchanging of fire that we've seen. But the reason that tonight's exchanging of fire is noteworthy is because of where these negotiations stand and the fact that both sides were saying how close they are to a deal, yet we're still seeing some kind of fire during what should be a ceasefire and negotiations, Jesse.
And it raises a question about the timeline, right, Libby? I mean, yesterday the president said that the U.S. and Iran could come to terms to end this war this weekend. Is that realistic?
Yeah, I mean, the president himself, Jesse, has said that he believes the war is over. He said that before the signing of this deal. As far as if it's realistic for that to happen, the president has floated multiple times heading into weekends that this deal was on the precipice. And the senior administration official today who was speaking said that in the next few days this could come together. They're about 85% there. There's still, of course, that 15% that is the big question, because we've heard this before. We've heard administration officials say that they're close to a deal. We've heard the president say they're close to a deal and that not come to fruition, Jesse.
Okay, so I mean, this feels kind of different when you're hearing this conversation from not only Pakistan. Iranian's foreign minister says that they're close. Oh, you put that to the side. I want to talk about the president's birthday, 80th birthday. What can we expect? I'm reading motocross rider Travis Pastrana maybe performing a backflip. What can we expect?
I have no idea about that, Jesse, but I do know there will be Trump administration officials there. The president will obviously be there for his big birthday bash. But I know that also, including this motorbike show that you just talked about, they could also have a weather show as well. We could see rain, potentially some bad weather. And there is going to be thousands of people on the South Lawn. You've got 120,000 people expected on the ellipse as well. So I think that's going to be a big concern heading into this weekend, along with this potential motorbike that's going to be on the South Lawn.
Apparently. Well, if it rains, I don't know what they're going to do. Just go and watch like Friends and Neighbors? I don't know. Is that the plan if it all rains?
The executive producer had actually said that the plan is to stay on air. They haven't really outlined, the administration hasn't outlined what the plan is.
All right.
But I mean, there's thousands of people. We actually saw something similar happen tonight. There was that press conference in front of the Lincoln Memorial where all the fighters were coming out, and they basically just delayed it and the show went on. So we could see something like that happen on Sunday.
Surreal. We'll cover it here on News Nation.
The president has to leave for the G7.
Yeah, and that's right. That's right. Yeah. All right, Libby. My gosh. Busy weekend. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jesse.
All right, coming up, there's going to be Knicks in 5. Is that what we're going to see? Can the Spurs survive to play another day? We got a preview of Saturday's NBA Finals Game 5, plus a look at the World Cup. Team USA. Big sports, too. That's next. Tonight, we may be on the eve of an NBA Finals finale, potentially history in the making. The New York Knicks can clinch their first title in 53 years if they win Saturday's Game 5. And fans, they are still riding this wave of excitement from Wednesday's record-breaking 29-point comeback at Madison Square Garden. We covered it live here. And it looks like many of them are going to be in San Antonio on Saturday because data from secondary ticket sites, TickPick and Game Time, show 45 to 54% of tickets purchased for Game 5 were by people in New York and New Jersey. So as far as fans from Texas, TickPick said those fans accounted for just 12% of ticket prices, or purchases. But as the NBA season nears its conclusion, you know what else is happening? The world's biggest sporting event has only just begun this year. American soil. That's right. The U.S. is sharing FIFA World Cup hosting duties with Mexico and Canada. The 2026 tournament is the largest ever with 48 teams in the field. Fans of the Stars and Stripes are hoping their team are going to be the last one standing. They got the 13th best odds of doing so. This is according to BetMGM. The U.S. men's best ever finish was third in 1930. That was the first ever World Cup. The U.S. just won, by the way, their opening match 4-1 against Paraguay. And if America makes it to the finals, they're going to play at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey. That's where we find WPIX sports anchor, co-host of New York Nightcap, Simone Eli, my buddy. Hey, Simone, good to see you. So let's talk about tomorrow. The Knicks, they have a habit of mounting a comeback, 29 points down. You know, it was amazing to see what happened here. What do they have to do tomorrow to seal it?
Yeah, Jesse, as incredible as it was to watch that comeback, 29 points, the biggest comeback in finals history, nobody wants that again. Mike Brown said very quickly after that game, we have to refocus, get over the emotional high and all of the exhaustion that it took to come back from that huge deficit at Madison Square Garden 48 hours ago. Focus on Game 5, go on the road, and get it done. It's a quick turnaround, no question about that. But from the emotional standpoint, the physical standpoint that it took to come back from the deficit, this team needs needs to get out hot early. Do not get down. Do not let the Spurs antics that we've seen so far from Wemby and others get in the heads of these players. Focus on the task at hand, win in 5, and come back with the championship, Jesse.
Yeah, you mentioned it. They got to try to figure out a way to shut Wembanyama down. What about the Spurs? What do they got to do?
Yeah, the Spurs, kind of same goes. Here's the thing. It's not like the Spurs got to the finals because of luck. They got here because they're talented. And not just Victor Wembanyama, but they're very, very deep. Unfortunately, unfortunately, if you're a San Antonio fan, I should say, for them, they have not shared the basketball in a way that has contributed to their success. We saw them hit the 3 incredibly in that first half of Game 4 a couple of days ago, but then went completely cold from outside. They were shooting too early in the clock count. They just need to stay within themselves in these possessions. Nobody, of course, in the New York area is cheering for the Spurs, but San Antonio going to look to bounce back in a big way. They're going to have to do it in front of a crowd that is going to be Knicks heavy in San Antonio.
Let's talk about that, because you would think, playing home ground advantage, they get the excitement. You have this wave of orange and blue in the stands. I don't know if Chalamet and Ben Stiller are going to be there, but doesn't that have an impact on the team?
Oh, of course it does. Absolutely. And look no further than the last 2 series that the Knicks have played. Of course, in Philly 2 series ago, and then in Cleveland, we saw a huge fan base of New York taking their entire fan base on the road. Right. They swept both of those series. Of course, they're not going to sweep the finals because right now it's 3-1. But when they've gone on the road and these fans have traveled, all you're hearing is let's go Knicks, completely taking over the entire arena. It's hard for an opponent. It's almost embarrassing to a sense. So can the Knicks or can the Spurs get out early and try to set the tone in this game on their home court? We'll find out pretty soon.
All right, World Cup time. How far do you think the U.S. team's going to go?
Yeah. We're going to see, hey, a good start, right? 4-1, the win over Paraguay, but we cannot wait, of course, tomorrow right here at MetLife Stadium, but for the next 5 weeks, it'll be known as New York and New Jersey Stadium for the FIFA World Cup. But, I think the United States, of course, has decent odds, no question about that, but you got to think about all of the teams, including Brazil, who's going to take the stage tomorrow against Morocco right here in New York. They have a record 5 wins, World Cup wins in their history, so a lot of countries with a lot on the line. You think about Portugal and a lot of countries that are trying to kind of give that last hurrah for some of their best players. It's going to be a lot of fun, a very busy time in the city, Jesse. But listen, we're going to make you a sports genius by the end of all of this for sure.
Good luck. Good luck. I'm learning from you. You're a good teacher. Although I will tell you, it's interesting with the World Cup being here, it has this renewed interest in football, right? In a way that I don't think a lot of people have seen. So it's a great thing for the sport. It's a great thing to have all these different sporting competitions happening at the same time. It's a good break from everything else happening in the world. Simone Eli, my buddy, we'll see what happens Saturday. Good seeing you.
Can't wait. Can't wait. Thanks, Jesse.
All right, up next, just when you thought it was safe to go back into the water, yep, I said it. So we have a serious warning for anyone going to the beach this summer. Scientists say there could be a surge of sharks on both U.S. coasts. We're going to talk to one of our favorite shark experts, see what's going on. That's next. Okay, so you got to hear this. Godzilla, El Nino, and great white sharks. Those are 2 things you don't want to hear when you're planning your summer trip to the beach. But scientists are sending these warnings from coast to coast about a possible surge in sharks this summer. So to give you an idea, on the West Coast off Southern California, the expected shark invasion is due to a weather pattern known as Godzilla El Nino. And then you go to the East Coast off South Florida, and there's this really gross brown seaweed. It's called sargassum. It could attract more sharks. We're going to get to that a little bit more in a minute. But first, going back here, I want to talk about this Godzilla or Super El Nino. So NOAA forecasters have now confirmed the formation of El Nino, which is basically warmer than average ocean temperatures in parts of the Pacific. And they warn that this year could intensify to historic levels, which is where the Godzilla part comes in. So what does that have to do with the sharks? Well, now I'm going to do a little math for you to make sense of it. So scientists say El Nino, right, brings warmer winter weather. Then you add the Pacific Ocean, right? You add to that El Nino's above average temperatures in the Pacific, and what do you get? Right there, sharks. Makes sense. Okay, so scientists say the sharks, they travel north from Mexico, up to the Pacific to escape the super warm winter, and that means a likely increase in shark activity along the southern California coast. Joining me now, who's going to explain it much better than me, shark expert, environmental engineer, Dr. Tracy Fanara. Always good to see you. Did I get it right? I mean, what am I missing about the connection between El Nino and sharks?
I think your math was perfect.
Thank you. Thank you. It was good. But seriously, how much of a concern is this, and why does this happen, and why is it happening so much now?
So El Nino is part of the El Nino Southern Oscillation climate pattern. Like you were saying, trade winds start to weaken, warm surface waters come closer to the east and the western coast of the United States, California. So those warmer temperatures dictate ecology and dictates predation, metabolism, oxygen availability, productivity, everything like that. So juveniles can expand their habitat further north.
You mean baby sharks?
Baby sharks.
Because if I'm correct me wrong, the baby sharks, they really don't like the ocean temperatures that are too high, right? And explain why that is and how much that is a concern for all of us.
Yeah, so the baby sharks, they're just like the older sharks. They are cold-blooded. They're more sensitive to those temperature changes. All the species have their threshold where they like it best. But juvenile sharks, they have less energy storage. They get physiologically stressed with high or low temperatures, and they're just smaller in general. So they're more sensitive to those temperature changes.
And I'm glad you used the term juvenile sharks as opposed to baby sharks, because the way that I make it sound, it's like, oh, they're baby sharks. No, you're like, juvenile sharks, quite serious. South Florida, sargassum, this threat of sargassum, this brown seaweed, are you expecting to see a lot of this summer? What does it attract the sharks?
We're getting hammered with sargassum. There's so much sargassum. We're at like 29 million tons of sargassum throughout the Western Pacific, through the Caribbean, into the Gulf of Mexico. And the cool thing about sargassum, just like we were saying with the sharks, physics dictates the chemistry and then it dictates the biology. And with sargassum, you can literally see the ocean currents by where the sargassum ends up. And here where I am in Tampa, Florida, we're not getting any, but it's hammering Miami. But yes, these sargassum mats are basically like ecosystems. They can attract bait fish, that can attract sharks. Now, is the problem for the public? I mean, when these mats are out in the ocean and they're attracting sharks, it's just productivity. It's the circle of life. But when the sargassum comes on shore causing problems, it tends to cause hypoxia. It suffocates the life underneath it. That's not something sharks are really attracted to. So I wouldn't be too worried about having shark interactions at the beach because of sargassum.
What about goblin sharks? My producer even had to tell me about these. What are goblin sharks? Where are they?
They're probably the coolest sharks in the world. They live hundreds to thousands of feet below the surface, where it's super dark, okay? So they're pink, but they're pink because they're translucent. You can actually see their blood. They have this snout that can sense electromagnetic forces. So they sense their food because it's really dark down there. They can't see anything. And then they have this jaw that extends. So they're really slow, but their jaw, how it extends out and gets their prey, is faster than any shark on Earth.
Listen, more power to you. You say it's awesome. It sounds like the most terrifying thing I think I've ever heard. Listen, thank you for explaining it. It's very important. People need to know before they go out for the summer. Dr. Tracy Fanara, thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So Steven Spielberg was in the middle of promoting his brand new sci-fi movie, right, Disclosure Day, when he was asked a question about one of his most beloved films, a question fans have been waiting, 44 years to have answered? His answer, pretty shocking. My 2 cents on all that when we come back. If you ever got the chance to sit down with Steven Spielberg, what would you ask him? Well, one podcaster, Josh Horowitz with Happy, Sad, Confused podcast, got the chance while Steven Spielberg was promoting his new sci-fi film, Disclosure Day. Asked the one question that generations of movie fans have been wondering ever since E.T. flew home back in 1982. Take a look.
Did Elliot ever see E.T. again?
No, never saw him again.
But he did dream about him. So there was the psychic link between the two of them. If you notice that E.T. touched Elliot right here and said, "I'll be right here."
I'm just going to say it. I kind of wish he didn't answer that. Like, the little kid in me is like, not okay about that. But also, I don't even think that's true. Back in 2019, Xfinity aired a holiday commercial where actor Henry Thomas returns as a grown-up Elliot as E.T. comes back to Earth and meets his family.
Elliot? Elliot.
You came back. My son, my family.